Mswatu inkosi ithula akayithathe akahambe nayo akayithathe yotenza bakhe
Kusile, Masalamahle, it's a very good morning. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Monday edition of Kusile Breakfast Show. It's a brand new week. We're looking forward to brand new opportunities. This week. Welcome and my name is Dungelele Makakula with my co-host Umguni Chimnagbili.
Doing very well, very motivated and energized, especially from, and you know, I just feel right now that maybe I should share the word from my church this past weekend, and that is about being the light and being radiant and always being dipped in humility and in God's light. And that is a decision that you choose to take every day, and that is certainly the decision that we choose to take this morning as we start the day, and we hope that you can further that in your own personal life. A lot of these verses are quoted under the book of Philippians and the book of Matthew. Be the light and be radiant as we start the week. Otherwise, it's a very good morning indeed. We still focus on a lot of key issues that, of course, implicate on the country's economy. And certainly, we would be negligent not to really look at the biggest one as we kickstart the week. Of course, we enjoyed the speech from the throne on Friday by His Majesty King Eswatini III. 35 bold directives from the throne. And this morning we talked to our economist, Kusile, having seen that the focus now shifts to the Prime Minister as well as the Cabinet as to how do they deliver to Eswatini all these bold directives. And of course, everyone has been talking about that very, very declaration by the King and bold call to the health sector that the drug shortage should end now. All of that this morning at 7:30 as we speak to Kusile virtually. Stay with us.
Yeah. Another discussion we're going to have this morning is the Siswati language, our mother tongue. Following the United Nations have celebrated or commemorated International Mother Tongue Day on Saturday. Eswatini is commemorating the day. Lomuhla Eksene. We're going to be speaking to the president of the Eswatini Siswati Subject Teachers Association, Makawe Dlamini. We're going to be speaking to the president what efforts lying Lendiwa level to preserve the Siswati language. He'll join us in studio today at 6:30. So don't go anywhere. For now, let's take a look at newspaper headlines. All right, starting off with the Eswatini Observer, leading stories this Monday. MPs warn cabinets, no more excuses. Legislators pledge to enforce directives on healthcare infrastructure. Parley promises strict oversight of budget allocations and says King's vision calls for improved service delivery. And in other news, King summons Lutango for Bukanu ceremony. Minister of Home Affairs Princess Lindiwe, with members of Lutango as Indvuna Tseliwe makes an announcement on the commencement of the first leg of Bukanu Festival. And in other news, view one's images, voice notes can destroy the youth. And on another one, CMAC ends SANU strike with 4% COLA.
Eswatini Observer Sports headlines this Monday. Football day of shame as violent fans turn on the referee. Game halted after 91 minutes as the fans invade pitch and assault the referees. Gunshots were fired. Highlanders superfan Yellowman was shot in the knee, and Ingwenyama MC to wait for reports as coach Ernest pleads for a replay. In other stories, sprinters miss Glasgow's qualifying marks, and Bull superfan Yellowman has been shot when Ashiba, who's the Nsingizini Hotspurs president, says football is in a crisis.
We've gone to the Eswatini Daily News, leading stories. King commissions Lutsango for Bukano Festival. ID card production resumes. And on another one, 360,000 Malangeni Fund powers youth innovation solutions. In other stories, NMC slashes maize prices, saving buyers almost 2,000 per ton. And in other stories, farmer harvests his first tilapia fish.
Eswatini Daily News Sport, the top story is chaotic, written in red there with an exclamation mark, as enraged Mbabane Highlanders fans ran amok when they attacked referee Celu Musa Sipepo. That is after the Nsingizini Hotspurs snatched a late winner in Ingwenyama Cup last 16th stage clash. This was at the Mavuso Sports Center on Sunday. In other stories, ex-Bull star Mlilo wins Nedbank Cup gong, while Spurs and Newcastle both eye Nunes.
All right, ngileta wele thamba imbili ngo 6 minutes after 6 sithatha salikhefu sabenethi nzabade seswati.
To all the viewers of Eswatini TV in the kingdom and beyond. Eswatini TV is regulated by the Eswatini Communications Commission through the Broadcasting Code and Broadcasting Guidelines. Under these instruments, the station commits to broadcasting information and news that have been fact-checked, programs and content in respectful language with no elements of hate speech, violence or sexual activity. If you hear any unsuitable content on this channel, you have a right to voice your complaints with the station management. Should you not be satisfied with the response or action taken, you can escalate your matter to the Communications Commission at PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Call 2406 7000 or send an email to info@esccom.org.za. For more information, visit www.esccom.org.za.
Siphinze sinamukele ehlelweni Kusile Breakfast Show, ihlelo lwekuqala liviki. Indzaba yekuqala emakhosi sakamemetela uthango ukuthi luphelele nebugani bakhe esigodlweni ebuhleni mhla tinge-27 kulesetulu. Lokhu kuvakele ngendvuna Dzeliwe Ndwandwe ngesikhathi yenta simemetelo esigodlweni eLutsitsini.
Lalela sikutshele tindzaba letibuye enkosini. Uthokandaba lutsango lonke lwakahoho aluphelele lapha esigodlweni ebuhleni nebugani bakhe kundlovana mhla tinge-27 kuyawuthi mhla tinge-28 engomeni yakhe mhla lulunye kundlovulenkulu ayachithwe emabutho wophezu kwemkhono. Usho njalo mswazi omnyama kulabaluthuli ulodungandaba sembelebeleni kulodungandaba semambondweni bayethe wena waphakathi
bayethe wena waphakathi
phezu komkhono ngekuthunywa ngawe emakhosi libutho lelithango libheke ukuthi livunule lihiya lelibovu ngemgcibelo bese ngelisondo livunda lihiya leli orange nibe bahle bophezulu kwemkhono nivunule into yinye nonke kutoba kuhle lokuleni kwendako bayethe wena
waphakathi
Baholi bebimango badzinga kubanjiswa ngemthandazo kude bavikeleke baphindze bathathe netincumo letiphatselene nesive ngekholwa ngumoya loyingcwele. Lokho kuvetwe kusihlalo webafundisi emphakathi wasemaphalaleni imbuso wezulu enkonzweni yekucala kweminyaka lebekade ibanjelwe emabaleni yalomphakathi ngelisondo.
Lenkonzo ihlanganisa amakhulukhulu esive liseluswe ngephansi kwalomphakathi nalesicamuka emabandleni lehlukene lapho kuthandazelwa umnyaka lobusisekile lokubufakazi ukuthi leSwatini solo lusimelele ephusheni nenkosi somhlolo sihlalo webafundisi kulomphakathi imbuso wezulu sihlongonyane uveta kumcuko belibandla indlunkulu
njengoba iBhayibheli lisikhuthaza encwadini yaThimothi ukuthi labaphethe imango nelive badzinga ukuthi sibakhulekele kude site ukuphila kahle eveni. Indlunkulu inebantu abahlala khona bayasho ukuthi emva kwemthandazo kuba khona into leti etibonakale letiphatheke labakhululeka kuto.
Lilunga lePhalamende lalenkundla umhlonishwa wamabulala amaseko lithi bangilababuke sive bayidzinga inhlakanipho yemthandazo njengomadingenti itinsela babhekana nato basacuba umsebenzi wabo.
iBhayibheli liyasho ukuthi umthandazo unemandla. Ngakho-ke nawunemandla kude longafuni amandla nakasasebenza. Amandla uyadzinga usagijima uthinta lokwa nalokwa lokuthinta inkundla lokuthinta nelive laseSwatini lonke jikelele by extension ngokuthi ube nemandla. Sithi-ke asicale ngokubonga emakhosi emhlaba lasifundzise ukuthi umthandazo iyona ngoni lekufanele siphephele kuyo. Besibobani-ke thine lebe singase sehluka kuloko sesenda lokuthandwa ngithi. Konke lesifise ukuthi kukhanye kulomnyaka akungachamuki nje emandleni ethu ngobe sibuthakathaka angeke sikhona ngamandla ethu kepha-ke kachamuke emandleni akhe umdali wezulu nomhlaba.
Sikhulu semphakathi wasemaphalaleni umntwana enkosi Mashila sithi menyenti imisebenzi yentuthuko lede ngemthandazo kulomphakathi waveta ukuthi kulomnyaka loseduru bafise kulwa netehlakalo leti bangayindlala.
Ngibonga kakhulu nje kuNkulunkulu ukuthi lo mthandazo awuphakamise onke lamave lalakithi kangwane lemphakathi ibe nalo leligalelo lokuthandaza singakaqali tinkulumo ngoba lelive lakithi lisolo liyasha asicele ke uNkulunkulu ukuthi lokusha kwalo mana lethi imvula yakhe liphole lisha kithi liphindze lishe nasemasimini netinkomo kuyasha nalotshani nanyalo lishe lonke lelive kude la kunembila khona kubuye nesangqodo sasigcoba kakhulu kepha konke lokufuna sikubhekise kuye uNkulunkulu.
Lo mphakathi ubamba lenkonzo ngemuva kwamalanga lambalwa nelive licetha kubamba umthandazo wekucala kweminyaka. Lo bikako ngumpendulo kumbi emaphalaleni.
Kulandzela ukuthi umphakathi wasemaphalaleni ubambe umthandazo wekucala kweminyaka sive nebazalwane labadzala kanye nalabancane lababeyingcenye yale nkonzo baveta-ke tinhlangothi letinyenti naletahlukene labafise ukuthi le nkonzo ibetfalise kuko kusachubeka. Kanti-ke lesive salomphakathi sibeke kanjena.
uNkulunkulu ngafisa amane angisida kuko kulomnyaka ukuthi ngisawucala lo mnyaka ngigcine ngiwutholile phela Nkosi yami umsebenzi.
Kuphila kahle ngelive laNkulunkulu angivikele nami asesikolweni nanami liyasikhuthatha kakhulu ngoba nebantu bethu kakhulu lensha etintweni etiningi iyakhawuleka bayekele ukugudla titolo bedela batokhonta inkosi njengaNkulunkulu wabo.
Impilo nakwakha impilo ukuthi ichubeke nje lempilo ngichubeke ngakhe ngente konke lengifuna inkosi lefuna ngikwente.
Ngifisa ngasi lo mthandazo angavula inhlakanipho kimi anganzise nebatali bami tinsuku tekuphila khona nami ngifunza ngicede.
Ngifisa nje ukuthi ekhaya lami uNkulunkulu angiphe emandla ukuthandaza ukuthi ngibabiyele abantu abami nangabe kuyabida bakhule babantwana laba besaba uNkulunkulu ngaso sonke isikhathi ngoba diningi timphile sibhekana nato emakhaya kuningi lokuvelako sehlede emakhaya.
Ngingimake nje mina lo mthandazo lothi sibomake kwangathi besingaba bomake bemthandazo ngoba singakathandazi ngeke sikhone kwabamba lamakhaya. Le nkonzo ingiside kakhulu ngisalalela nje live laNkulunkulu liyangikhuthaza lokuthi sibomake asibo bomake labaqonzile labangabhekile nale.
Abe nami ngithembe iminyaka angiphe Nkosi yami tibusiso nami ngibusiseke nje kakhulu empilweni ngithole lokwa nalokuya ukutawenta impilo ichubeke.
Inkampani Basadi Group seyinikelele abantwana besikolo labangamashumi bendzawo yasezone 4 eMbabane ngecatfulo tesikolo. Le nkampani ithi kwenta lokhu ngekuconza ukuthi kunakekela imfundo yemntfwana kufaka sandla lesibandi ekutfutfukiseni umnotfo welive kanye nekulwa nebucala. Lo mnikelo wentelwe esiteshini lesincane semaphoyisa eHilltop eMbabane.
Nakethula lo mnikelo weticathulo umphakathi wenkampani Basadi Group imbonga siphelele Mkhonda ichaze ukuthi lokhu kuyimpendulo yesicelo lesalethwa abaphathi besiteshi lesincane semaphoyisa eHilltop ngamuva kokuthi babone isimo sekuswela kulabanye abantwana besikolo kulendzawo.
Ngekubambisa live ngokubambisa DPM lusukele lo mkhankaso wokugijima lonke live ngaside bantwana.
Uthi lo mnikelo uyingxenye yokubambisa live ekuthuthukiseni inhlela kahle yesive njengoba lelo hhovisi leliphindandunankulu liphumele esiveni kusilekelela lapho emandla aso amafisha khona. Lakhe idubelo selihlangothini lwekuvikela bucala embuthweni wembube nesive ubonga lo mnikelo wathi lokhu kutobuyisa ukutethemba kubantwana bakhona ekuchubeka nesikolo ngaleyo ndlela kunciphe bucala.
Sisandla nje ukubonga lokho ikakhulu lokuthi abantu basibambisa sivele thina simaphoyisa.
Uthi batala baqinisekise ukuthi bantwana bayawathola emalungelo abo kakhulu lelo letemfundo kude nesive sitolekelela lapho bangasakhoni khona. Uchubeka uthi emaphoyisa imbube ayingxenye yamango lasebetela kuyo kungako batinaka tidzingo tawo. Emaphoyisa imbube nesive ake aveta embikweni yawo kuthi bucala lobanze kakhulu kubantu labasha labafaka ekhatsi nebantwana besikolo ngolobo betigungu tetinombolo. Kubika Mbongwa Dube eMbabane.
Kuba netinombolo letingito telinani lebantfu labakhona lapha eveni kuyamsita hulumende ekutsenini yakhona ekuhlela ngendlela lengiyo etindzabeni tentfutfuko kanye netemnotfo. Lokhu kushiwo ngilobukela ihhovisi letelibalo lapha eveni Hanson Dlamini uma khutsata sive semaswati ukuthi sibambise tisebenti taleli hhovisi tisachubha lubalo lolu nvulela lolukhulu lolutawubanjwa ke eminyakeni lotako i-population census. Dlamini ukuvete lokhu nje kulandzela tikhalo letisebenti letihlangabetana nato tisachubha lo msebenzi.
Sikhone kubala abantu kufuna sicale sibale kwekuthi lamadladla lakhona noma lemito ema-households mangakhi tingcinamba tiba khona nasisabala kakhulu ingcinamba ngile kungabatholi bantu la emakhaya. Le ngcinamba lena-ke ilapha emadolobheni nakuleti ndzawo letitutane nemadolobha. Cishe ngikhona kakhulu vele la singakhoni kubathola khona. Sizathu sekuthi basemisebentini baze batholakale entsambama kakhulu kuye ngekuthi satile yini kwekuthi umuntu uyawubuya nini. Ngiyona ngcinamba nje lenkulu kakhulu leyo. Bese kuba nalenye ingcinamba laba khanza ukuthi bakhile akungeneki la emakhaya abo kunale ma-wall fence nemagede ahlala akhiyiwe nako lokho kuyasenda lokuthi sibetele access ukuthi singene. Lokunye lengakuveta kungaba ngulabo nje ukhanza ukuthi abacondzisisi kokuthi lubalo lwani bese sebayala lokusiniketa lemininingwane noma sesibakhanzile nabo labo siyabacela ukuthi basiphendule futhi ngaloku liqiniso ngoba labanye ukhanza ukuthi sebayakuphendula nje bentela kokuthi utondlula kubo kanti phela lemininingwane yonke lele siyitholako nguyo lena leta wakhalive kusasa yonke i-development ima eduke ukuthi sithole ini timpendulo letiliqiniso ngoba ngito lele tisiniketa sithombe sekuthi lelive vele lime kanjani ngabe lishoda ngakuphi kuze kuthi laba-ke labahlela lentuthuko bathi kwekuthi sivele sinenge lesidzinga loku singakuphi lesidzinga loku singakuphi.
Inkundla kalobamba iyachubeka nekubambisa emakhosi kanye nahulumende kunakekeleni inhlalakahle yabantu labadzala kuleli. Le nkundla seyinikelele mkhulu Nicholas Dlamini wasezulwini yamnikelela indlu yekulala kulandzela ukuthi lena bekahlala kuyo bese iwile ngenxa yokuguga netimvula. Lo mnikelo walendlu wetfulwe lilunga lephalamende lenkundla kalobamba umhlonishwa Michael Masilela.
Mkhulu Nicholas Dlamini oneminyaka lengu-74 uhlala yedwa kuleli khaya ngenxa yokuthi ude bantwana uthi emakhata netimvula bese kudentela nje kuye kulandzela ukuthi indlu elidzaka lebeka yakhe yasenemandla ithilidwe ngito timvula. Selithula lendlu lilunga lephalamende lenkundla kalobamba umhlonishwa Michael Masilela ligcizelele ukuthi sonke sive kufanele sibonakale sifaka sandla ekunakeni inhlalakahle yabantu labadzala njengoba emakhosi elive asayikhombile indlela.
Nathi bekunene sithunyiwe nasithunyiwe ke siyasukuma kakhulu ngicela kubonga bonke nje labangibambisile lamajabe kangakhela la kube likhulu bekunene tikolo tisiphethe kepha siphinze sahlephula kokuthi akhone naye kokuthi alale njengoba nimbona nje kokuthi na kanje awu ithi ingonyama sinakekele bantu labadzala.
Umoya wami uphakeme kakhulu ngani bathi ba ngiyawuthokoza futhi nangalemela ngekunibonga kwami angadi ukuthi inhliziyo yami ngiyibone ukuthi ngithokoze kangakanani.
Lo bongele indlunkulu yasezulwini Simon Ndwandwe udumise libandla lenkundla ngakunaka sive wacela nabo makhelwane bamkhulu Nicholas Dlamini ukuthi bahle bamhlola njengoba ahlala yedwa. Sethi isikhombisa tindlule setakhiwe taphinze tanikelelwa abantu labeswele ngiyo inkundla yakalobamba. Kubika Mbongwa Dube ezulwini.
Kubumbana kanye neluthando lolunganati incabekelwano ngikona-ke kutawusita live leSwatini ukuthi lilwe kangcono nekuhlukubetana ngetebulili. Lokho kuvele emcimbini wemncintiswano wemgidvo wetemasiko lebewukatse ubanjelwe kancesi kanti-ke bewuhlanganise tinkundla letimbili lekuyinkundla yasenkhaba neyasemaphalaleni. Lo mcimbi uhlelwe ngumkhankaso i-1 Billion Rising ibambisene nenhlangano yetemasiko isidla ngaloludzala Cultural Group.
Lo mkhankaso uchutshwe ngekuthi emacembu langetulu kwema-20 labuya emimangweni lengaphansi kwenkundla yasenkhaba kanye neyasemaphalaleni acutselane kutemgidvo yemasiko efaka ekhathi ingadla, sibhaca kanye neluthango. Kulo mcimbi bekuphinze kufundiswa sona sive ngekugwema tekuhlukubetana ngetebulili.
Ekutameni kulekelela hulumende sicondzane ukuthi emasiko nemihambo yakangwane ngikungithi buntu bethu and nasita ngabe asetshenziswe kahle singavikeleka. Kungako ke sisebenzisa kutheni asesiwakhulumise ngoba asasetshenziswa kabi asetshenziswa kucinzetela bulili lobuthide. Namuhla ke sitofundisana ukuthi sisengamaswati abe sibe nglamaswati lane ngihloniphana sibe nglamaswati langasebenzisa imihambo nemasiko uqinzetela labanye kepha siwasebenzise kuphakamisa ubuve bethu siqhubeke sivikelane sihloniphane.
Emalunga ePhalamende yaleti inkundla letimbili, umhlonishwa Mabulala Maseko waseMaphalaleni kanye nemhlonishwa Hope Shiba waseNkhaba bachaza ngebumcoka lobulethwa ngumcimbi lofana nalona kuleti inkundla tabo.
Emakhosi nasekashito ukuthi akube ne-agape love. Sithithe-ke thina sengileta inkundla totimbili asibe bokuqala kukhombisa ukuthi sinetindlebe siyeva. Tinkundla-ke system tipromota lokho lokuthi kasivane kasithandzane. Lapho khona kunempilo lenhle kunekuvana. Kude lo ngathi uyakwenda lokutawuhluleka. Noma ngawufuna kususe ama-projects njengoba thina sigijima kakhulu endzabeni tabo RDF kanye netikhwama letinye letikhona leti-providwa nguhulumende netinini tahulumende. Kusenta kokuthi kusikhandze sithandzana sibambene.
Lokhu kusita kakhulu ukuthi lesive sithole lithuba lokuthi sibumbane sibe munye sidlale kanye sishaye ingoma sikutselane kube mnanzi kakhulu. Nato leti inkundla letimbili kutenta ukuthi tikhone kuhlangana sidlale kanye sibuke lesive saleti inkundla sidlala sikutselana kuba mnanzi. Lokho kusinika nemathuba ukuthi sikhone nekukhuluma nangendvuthuko ukuthi singabambisana kanjani njengoba sibomakhelwane.
Labahambe embili esibhaceni kube liqembu lentaba kayikhonjwa laseMaphalaleni kwathi eluthangweni kwahamba embili lwaseluvinjelweni kanti engadleni kuhambe embili insingizi lemnyama yaseNkhaba. Kubika Mbongwadube kaNcesi.
Sitalo wenhlangano isidla ngaloludzala cultural group sithayisa ikhonze uthi kubambisana kwabo nemkhankaso i1 billion rising kutawulekelela ekufundziseni sive ukuthi sitigcabe ngembuve baso sisebenzise emakhono aso kude sikhone kudiphilisa kanye nekuqinisekisa kuthula emakhaya nasemangweni. Sikhonze usho lamavilawa emcimbini wetemasiko lakhona bekuchuthelene khona emacembu emgidvo wetemasiko langaphansi kwenkundla yaseMaphalaleni kanye nenkhundla yaseNkhaba. Inhloso yaleyo mncintiswano bekukufundisa sive ngekulwa nekuhlukubetana ngetebulili. Kanti-ke lo mcimbi bewubanjelwe kaNcesi.
Inkosi yasithuma iculture. Iculture iyinkolo. Lokubulalana lokukhona akusinkolo akusiso siswati nasi kuyekele lokhu thina lelive liyewena sizama ukugruma lalabancane umuntu longathi ukuthi uyapi shosa kathi ukuthi uchamukapi sekuba side kakhulu lokhu kuyongwenyama cup lokusho wona athi ngwenyama cup na ubuka lezinga la namuhla kutabe kulukhulu ngwenyama cup.
Lesinye sesive lesingenelelo umchuthelwano wetemasiko sithi siyadithokotela timfundiso lesitithola kulombuthano njengoba tisikhumbuta ngebuve baso tiphindze tibuyise isimilo sebuntu sikwati kuvikelana ekuhlukubetekeni.
Umcimbi lo nomcwa kakhulu mina ngifuna lokuthi le generation lencane yakhona kufunza amasiko nemihambo lento ekeveni nalokuthi bakhona ku understanda tihlobo talemidlalo lokugidza ukuthi lokho yini
Thanza ukuthi liyafundzisa ngive bakhuluma ngekuthi kuhlela umndeni uyacheka nekokuthi abantu labaduna bangabahlukubeda abasikati ngekubashaya.
Kumcoka ukuthi ulandzelele iculture yakho ube khona ungato because now when the culture now ugidza udansa into konke ngeke ucabange tidzakamiva because ingqondo iyalibala.
Singabohlukubetana nje sibe nekuthula nje sibantu bobabe noma labaduna bangabahlukubedi bobake noma bosisi nabomake babahloniphe abantu labaduna. Tata amancane emathuba ekuthi kuvakale ukuthi abantu labanye babuleleni.
Ngisakhile njengabantu labasha ukuthi singahlukubetani ngoba ukuhlukubetana akusiyo info lenhle ene futhi akusakhi thina emaswati.
Tinyenti tintfo letendekile lamakhaya letingasiko right ukhanza ukuthi siyakuvimba lokunye asifuni ukukhiphela ebaleni but lo mcimbi lo ukhona ukuthi kutosita thine lamakhaya ukuthi ngendlela lesihlukubeteka ngayo lamakhaya kufuna ukuthi sikhona ukuthi sikhulume.
Kusho kwembiko wembutho wembubene sive emacala ekuhlukubetana ngetebulili labikwa ngeminyaka wa-2025 angetulu kwetinkulungwane letisithupha lapho lamanye awo ahamba nemiphefumulo. Kubika Mbonga Dube kaNcesi.
Likhethelo lesive labomake selithole liphuzu lekucala emidlalweni yeCOSAFA lonyaka kulandzela kudlala ngekulingana nelive leBotswana ngeligoli linye kulinye. Le midlalo yeCOSAFA idlalelwa edolobheni lasePolokwane eveni leNingizimu Afrika.
Likhethelo lesive labomake lakuleli sithebe samhlekazi idlala umdlalo waso wesibili wendzebe yeCOSAFA yabomake lonyaka ngaphasi kwaGroup B lapho khona belithola intulu nelikhethelo laseBotswana. Esigabeni sekuqala iBotswana iqale kahle yalithola liqala ngemuva komzuzu lengu-23 umdlalo udlaliwe lelishaya imola fatse Mamalia.
The scampering that takes place and running back to go and defend, leaving the defense, and wow, that beat me, and it had to be the experience of Abueng.
Kungakaphela isigaba sekuqala sithebe sikhombe kuTimisela salithola lekulinganisa lelishaya kuNonjabulo Mohale isigaba sekuqala saphela ngeligoli linye kulinye.
Under Johannes, here's an opportunity for Eswatini. Could this be the equalizer? Brilliant opportunity laid to rest, and that had to be an opportunity for Mohale to get to level terms with Botswana.
Esigabeni sesibili lamaqembu aqhubekile nekuthola emathuba kodwa-ke kubebede lelithola lekunqoba lomdlalo waphela umdlalo abambene lamakhethelo. Kulo mdlalo Simangele Sikhonze uthola umklomelo wa-Best Player of the Match. Lokusho ukuthi isithebe sithola liphuzu lekuqala kule midlalo yalonyaka kulandzela kukhala phasi kuZimbabwe namagoli amabili ecanzeni emidlalweni wokuqala kule ndzebe. Umdlalo olandzelako isithebe samhlekazi sitawuthola netulu leZambia ngalesibili kuleli viki litawuqala. Lobikako uLinda Dlamini eMbabane.
Tingakonza batethu tesiswati lulwimi lwemtsabo in conversation after the break.
Hello to all the viewers of Eswatini TV in the kingdom and beyond. Eswatini TV is regulated by the Eswatini Communications Commission through the Broadcasting Code and Broadcasting Guidelines. Under these instruments, the station commits to broadcasting information and news that have been fact-checked, programs and content in respectful language with no elements of hate speech, violence or sexual activity. If you hear any unsuitable content on this channel, you have a right to voice your complaints with the station management. Should you not be satisfied with the response or action taken, you can escalate your matter to the Communications Commission at PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Call 2406 7000 or send an email to info@esccom.org.za. For more information, visit www.esccom.org.za.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi.
Aba research bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna senze ukukhiqiza lokusembili.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds, full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Sinemukele sikuvusela mawusanza kusivulela siqhubana nohlelo lomhla kungumsombuluko ngemgcibeleko kulembela somvule sisuka kiyo amave emhlaba bekagubhala ilanga le-International Mother Tongue Language Day. Live leSwatini ke liyaligubhala lilanga lapha UNESCO lomuhla. Kusivita nje sithomese ukuthi vele ngabe silive sesihambe kanganani ukuzama ukupreserve yona ilanguage yethu Siswati sesenaye president wenhlangano ye-Eswatini Siswati Subject Teachers Association ukuthi nje ingabe vele letikolweni bafundi sebasathi na Siswati bayasiphasa yini vele alokuthi it's a language that is compulsory ukuthi basenda. Sikuvusele Nkosi, siyabonga usube nathi namhla ekseni. Ngicabanga ukuthi ilanga lelikhulu leli nalelibalekile ngibonile nje emave emhlaba lamanengi aligubhile on Saturday, but ke thina sili recognize lomuhla nje manje kutabana kunalo msebenzi lomuhla khona lapha endase eUNESA. But singakafiki lapho nje Nkosi, I think kungaba sivetela nje sithombe se i-background ne-history nje ukuthi kuzokusukunyisela lilanga leli kwakuhlosweni kahle kahle nekuva nje ukuthi vele lilanga leli mcokanganani sizive samaswati.
Siyabonga kakhulu msakade. Ngicela ukuvusela ngivusele nebabukeli emakhaya. Lelanga leli lekugujwa kwelisuku lwamake limcoka kakhulu waliphakamisa UNESCO. Wathi nakaliphakamisile UNESCO wabona ukuthi azama lokuthi onke emave kubeke embili kuhambisa embili lolwimi lwabo lwemtsabo. Lokulwimi umntana latalwa nalo aphinze futhi tinto ekucaleni nje kwempilo yakhe utifunza ngalo ngoba ekhaya uyadalwa anelwimi lwakhe leSiswati akhulume lona afundziswe nje tinto ngeSiswati angakangeni esikolweni kuthi nyalo so sesikolweni ke so uyafunza akangeni esikolweni ufunza ngalo lwimi leSiswati. So lumcoka kakhulu msakati lelanga leli ekutheni nje sigubhe lokungekwethu sikuthuthukise sikubambe singakuyekeli. Uma ubuka tive letiningi lesetithuthukile emhlabeni dihambisa embili kufundziswa kwelulwimi lwabo lokuqala. Nangabe nje umfundzi esuka la ayofundza even langesheya labanye kubhekekile ukuthi nakefika umnyaka wakhe wokuqala noma inyanga letisithupha tekuqala afunze lolwimi lwala lakatofunza khona ngoba le eklasini lakade abafunza khona kutabe kufundiswa ngalo. Nathi ke silive leMaswati sikhanze kuhle ukuthi singene njengoba afisile UNESCO ukuthi sigubhe lolusuku singene sikhulumisane sigcizelele nje bomcoka bekusebenzisa ulimi lwamake even.
Yeah, usakhuluma nje ngobomcwanga Nkosi, siyabona lishintsho linenge luyendeka ezikuhamba iminyaka timvoti yaguquka timvoti yashintsha timvoti yathuthuka kakhulukati and labanye batali banemibono lehlukene ngebantu ababo labanye beva kungathi abathi singisi kuphela bangalati lolwimi lwabo lwemtsabo njengoba usho ukuthi lumcoka. Ingabe nje ngekubuka kwenu as i-association nasibuka nje lolwimi leSiswati lusekhona noma kancane kancane luyashabalala luyasilahlekela ikakhulukati kuba mfabethu?
Etikolweni msakati angivetele ukuthi sinayo vele lenkinga ukuthi lolwimi kulabantwana seluyabaleka. Uma ubuka labaningi bakhona bachamuka vele etikolweni le ephasi kusukela enkhulisa bachamuka bakhuluma vele bafundiswa singisi. Nakefika ke la emabangeni laphasi betikolweni letincane so uyafunza ke Siswati kepha vele lo mntana so unale singisi la kuye sekwenta ke kube likhulu lokuthi asiphase lesifundo noma asikhulume kahle nje Siswati sibe Siswati lesikahle kusinika ke bulukhulu kakhulu la ekufundziseni ngoba sesiyacatulula netinto longabe asiticatulule ngabe nje umntwana uyadadi ngoba utifundzile ekhaya nikuthi ke emakhaya vele bantwana labaningi lamakhaya sekukhulunywa lesingisi nakukhulunywa lesingisi ke vele lesiswati sesibekwe emuva labanye ke bahamba bangaboni nalobumcoka balelwimi lwesiswati ukuthi akusitakangani wena kufuna ufunze isingisi wena kufuna ufunze iFrench lesiswati sitakangani kanzi lolwimi lomdzabo ngilo lolumcoka ngilo lolubeka lomfana ezingeni lelikahle lokuthi angakhona kufunza letinye tilwimi ngaphandle kwenkinga naloko ukuthi nje kube ligugu lekuthi lulwimi lwakho uyalwati futhi nalesifundo uyasiphasa nje ngaphandle kwenkinga lokusiphasa kalula kwenta naloko ukuthi nase umuntu lofise kuya emanyuvesi so uya apply so unaye A-star wakho unaye A wakho kaSiswati uyakungetela emaphuzweni ukuthi ungene kalula enyuvesi
ingabe kulikhulu kanganani nje khona la emaklasini inkosi bayaphasa envele because lomunye umfana vele kulikhunje ukuthi abambe conversation nje akhuluma Siswati ngiyabona nje lenye i-challenge la kubo social media labantu labadala banika abamfa babo i-camera bathi khuluma nje ngeSiswati phela ningakhulumile isingisi kulikhunyana ingabe bayaphasa envele linganani futhi lizingale kuphasa kwabo
eminyakeni emsakade Siswati besiphaswa esikolweni kushiyane nangalokuthi tikuphi nalamadolobhe nje bothola isikole letiphasako naletinye ke lokhanza ukuthi atendi kahle kodwa ke kulomnyaka imiphumela yethu yakaSiswati ehlile pass percentage yethu kuma credits kepha nje ke tindvo lesiti tawuhlala phasi sitibuke si-association nabo bonke labatsinzeka lokufaka ekhatsi bo panel nayo nabo base tiko letemfundo sitokhona kubuka lokho ukuthi ngabe lonyaka kwendekeni kodwa nje bothishela esikolweni bayasebenta kakhulu bayafaka imandla ngoba kunengi laba kwendako lokusita lokuthi labamfana babe nalomdlandla bokufundza lesifundo sesiswati tinenge nje tinhlelo letingenile eminyakeni lengcile letendiwa lokufaka ekhatsi kugubha lona lolusuku ma culture days ayendiwa esikolweni kakhulu atawucala nje nyalo atawutsicitsisa ka velonke nekuthi ke bafundzisi yabathatha etikolweni sibamikise etindzaweni lapho khona batawufundza khona ngeSiswati njengase Msamo wesive baye bomandenga bayobuka umuntu wesiswati nakuletinye tindzawo lapho khona singathola khona lwati ngato leti tesiswati nje nekuthi ke siyabanawo ke nemifundza skolo yabothishela isetawucala nje ingene velonke lapho khona sicijana khona nathi sihlomisana nabothishela ukuthi nasiya eklasini ngitiphi izinto letibhekekile nekuthi nje imiphumela lemihle singayithola kanjani lonyaka noma kungakabi njengaseminyakeni lengcile kodwa nje kaSiswati siyasebenta futhi ke siyathembisa nalo ukuthi lemiphumela yalonyaka ayisho ukuthi sesiphumile sitawubuyela nje sisebente kahle siwakhiphe ama results lafanele
lokusho ukuthi akhona selona aqhubeka nekona ema efforts yokupromoter lona lumi lwesiswati apart from lelanga nje lanamuhla kukhona imitamo leminye leniyendaka ukuzama ukupreserve the Siswati language
mina ngakhulu imitamo lendiwa komsakati vele siyasebenta la kaSiswati nje sithi sifundo lesingalali nangabe uvilapha ngeke ukhone la ngoba kuyasetshenzwa mningi kakhulu lomsebenzi so lo setama nje ukuthi sicije abantu abemaswati nabo baphase baphume nalokuthi bahambe baye emanyuvesi bahambe bakhone nekudiphilisa nje ngoba siyafundzisa nanemakhono okuphila ahamba khona ukudiphilisa umfundzi nakacetha isikole
okay ingabe selikhulu noma sisemalulani Siswati sethu Nkosi lomunye umfuthatha Siswati selikhulu mina vele ngahle ngikhuluma singisi but nawo bathi uyabuka nawo bese uyabuka bamfula basuka emaveni abo bete batohlala la eSwatini yabekisa nje belungu noma ke mhlambe ema agents uva sebakhuluma Swati bese uyamangala ukuthi hawu lona undlula lona loluswati so undlula umlungu so khuluma Siswati kepha lona oluswati akasati Swati ingabe ungasho ukuthi vele semalula Swati noma selikhulu
Siswati silula msakade kuba nje sengcondweni ukuthi wena udijela kuthini ikakhulu ngoba thine lulwimi lwethu lesitalwa nalo cabanga nasowuhlulwa ngumuntu wekuhamba afike akhone nje ukuthi ngesikhashana lesincane asifunze kalula asati siyafundzeka sifundo lesifundzekako kuya nje ukuthi esikhatsini lesiningi ukhanza ukuthi sikubukela phasi lokwethu ngoba sihawukela nakuya kwalabanye kanti nako lokho sitakuthola sitakufunza kepha nje kulula lokuthi ufunze singisi noma ufunze lolunye lulwimi nangabe wati lo lwakho lulwimi Siswati silula msakade siyafunzeka nabo thishela labakhona etikolweni uthishela laba bafaka kwemandla kufundisa abothishela kufundisa abothishela labanye kufundisa nebafunzi nje ukuthi kube lula lokufunza kwabo ngiyo ngithi emsakade akusiso sifundo lesilukhuni kuthi manje utimisela ngoba konke lokwendako kufuna utimisela esikhatsini lesiningi eclassini asifunzi lokufundiswa ekhaya sesifunza lokhu kwasesikolweni kuthi lokhu kuma kanje lokhu kuma kanje kubamba letinto leto utatishe kulokunye kuyadzinga ukuthi usebenzise ingcondo yakho kakhulu ubone lo ukuthi wena ungaphuma na deep isombululo nawe mhlambe kunenkinga letifika Siswati sifundo lesilula msana
ingabe nje ngosifo abafundi labafuna kungeta mhlambe vocabulary yabo ilimi lwesiswati njengoba nisho ukuthi vele solo ni zama lokuthi sipreserveke lesiswati bangati akhwenta kanjani ngalolu lwimi kumbe banga ema library inhle ngabasita nje ukuthi vele bagcina ngala kulolu lwimi
siyabonga msakade ngasiswati tiningi kakhulu incwadi lesethi khona letifundwako nje etikolweni kusukela emabangeni laphasi kufika emabangeni lasetulo uma utibuka letincwadi tinemagama lamaningi la kahle esiswati labangawasebenzisa abafundi netisho netaka tiyatholakala lakhathi ngito siphindeke saba nenhlanhla even sichaza amagama i-dictionary yecala lethatha ligama ngesiswati iphindze lichaza ngesiswati le publisher baka Imisebe Publishers kuthiwa ligama layo ngumphanza le dictionary leyo sichaza amagama ke sethu lesikhona konje ukuchazela ligama sikunikete amagama lamasha siphindze sikuchazele wehluka kabili ke lo mphanza lo kunemphanza wemabanga lasetulu umncanyana wona uyatholakala ku onke ama bookshops nje even la kaNgwane bese ke kuba nemphanza lomkhudlwana wemabanga laphasi primary wona ke muhle ngekuthi uphindze ube netithombe lakhathi uyabasita kakhulu ke bantwana so nanoma ngangibani nje eveni nalomdzala lofise nje kufunza ade amagama eseswati ukhona umphanza naleti incwadi ke letfundiswa le etikolweni tinawo lamagama eseswati tinato tisho netaka laba ngatisebenzisa nje bamvu emaswati ekhulumeni nje onke malanga
ingabe sekulate info mfana lo mhlambe ngabekisa lo teenager lo safisa ukufunza seswati noma sekhona lithuba lokuthi angakhona ukulifunza lo lwimi
lithuba lisesekhona msakade lithuba likhona ngisho kumuntu lomdzala lo neminyaka lengi-50 nalengi-60 laba kulesigaba leso nje bamfana lithuba lisesekhona siyaye sibathathe vele siyabavumela lo ukuthi bangasicala lesiswati ngoba uyukhanze ukuthi kulokunye nje siyaba nabo bamfana lokhanza ukuthi abengafunzi la kaNgwane mhlambe emabangeni laphasi so uyeta ke utocala form 1 nangathi ocala form 1 la kaNgwane siyamfaka eclassini lesiswati noma ngabe labe kafunza khona bekangasifunza siyamfaka eclassini lesiswati ahambe afunze siswati
ikubuda nje ngosikuthi vele ingabe lolulwimi singasho ukuthi it's under threat ikakhulu kade nje kubantu labasha abamfana nabo abantu labasha ama teenagers and also young adults
uqinisile lapho msakade ilwimi lethu vele lusenkingeni lenkulu luyahamba luyashabalala ngoba sesihambe sakuhambisa embili kakhulu lokukhuluma letinye tilwimi kanzi kufuna sibuyele kulokwethu kuyasilimata ke ngoba uma ubuka esikhatsini lesiningi nje basebenzisa lona vele kukhuluma kubhala kanzi siyaye sifise lokuthi vele ngathi singabuyela kulesiswati ngiko nje kunale misebenzi leminingi lebakhona even lapho khona sicucudela khona labamfana ukuthi ababuyele basebenzise lolulwimi lwesiswati uma ubuka nemthetho sisekelo wethu letulwimi letimbili singisi nesiswati udibeka kanye udithi siyaye ke sithi siyaye sijabule nasifika kuletinye isikole asikhanzele ukuthi vele sekwaphela naloko ukuthi umntwana lokhuluma siswati uyabhalwa phasa ayoshaywa ngoba ukhuluma siswati kuletinye kusesekhona kuletinye but sekude so siyacucudela nje ukuthi asibakhuthathe labamfa bethu lo ukuthi balukhulume lo lwimi lweSiswati balusebenzise kakhulu luto ubuya lulondvoloteke ngoba luyashabalala vele uma sibuka indlela lokwenteka ngayo esikhatsini talomuhla.
Yeah, so nangibuka nje this year le itheme yalo nyaka ifocus kakhulu vele kuma voices abamfla abasha on the multilingual kumbe kusichazela abantu njengayo le theme vele yalo nyaka ukuthi ingabe isibhekisaphi.
Ingcikithi yethu yalonyaka msakati sibhekisa khona lapho vele lokho ukuthi kule mfundo asisebenzise letilwimi letehlukene lokudilima temtsabi ikakhulu kulensha ngoba ngilapho lahleka khona lo lwimi lethu ukhanza ukuthi laba labadzala emakhaya nje banaso Siswati bayasikhuluma ngaphandle kwenkinga kepha ke kulensha kubonakele uboneleni nesikolo ukuthi dinengi letikhala lesetikhona lokhanza ukuthi labamfana abasakhoni vele kusikhuluma kahle lesiswati noma ke lulwimi lwabo lwemtsabu kushiyana ukuthi bachamuka kuphi siyayeke sithi nasibuka nje le ngengcikithi yalonyaka isikhulumela kahle lokho ukuthi asibuyeleni sikhulumise bampa bethu ngeSiswati sibakhuthathe ukuthi bakhulume ngeSiswati nasetikolweni sifake emandla la ekutheni vele lesiswati sihambe embili kulabamfana kude batokhona ukuthi bafunze kalula kulokunye nje msakade uyayubone na uhamba kuletinye tifundo ubone lokho ukuthi uyachaza thishela mhlambe uka maths noma kwa science uyachaza ngalezi ngisi but ubone silomntana akeva kahle lo munye uyakhona kubese sokuyabila ngalesiswati namchazele eveke lo mntana ngoba ngumntana leSiswati vele lona kucabanga kwakhe kwekucala kungalesiswati bese ke sokuya kwengcisa uyisa kulolu lunye lwimi lokufuna abhale ngalo sithi nje ingcikithi yethu sibekele kahle sifisile vele ukuthi bonke bamva bemaswati babuyele basikhulume kahle Siswati basifunze futhi basati nje ngaphandle kwenkinga.
Yeah, njengoba ngishilo nje ngokuthi vele kunebatali labanemivo noma ke imibono lehlukile lomunye umntali utawuthi umfana wakhe akanenzaba noma ngasadi Swati because utahamba emfundisa emaveni langephandle kwelive ngeke azasithinga eSwati anyway but utawuthi ngasingisi ingabe as association mhlambe lebuke the Siswati language ningathini nje mhlambe ngalokucabanga lokho kwalabanye badala bacabanga kanjalo
ukucabanga lokhu lesifiselo ukuthi mhlambe batali bakubeke eceleni le Siswati simcoka kakhulu kulomntana simcoka kakhulu ekufundzeni kwakhe nje uma sibuka labaningi balabamfa bethu sebabambana labafise kuyofundza emaveni langesheya emanyuvesi nasemakolleji langesheya lamanye alamave akuhambisa embili tindzaba tekwe ukuthi uma uta nje ungumntana weLiswati noma ungumntana lochamba kulelinye live nawe kukhona lokufuna ufike ubafundzise kona la kule live kuhamba kube nema cultural exchange programs tinhlelo letimcoka kakhulu so uyesuka ke lo mntana uyofundza kulelinye live akati lutho ngalesiswati akasakhoni lokufika le embili abeke lokho la kwadiko ngesiswati nje ngalesifundo nangetinto nje letenteka eveni la kaNgwane kuyingoti kakhulu lokho msakade kuyingoti kakhulu ngoba nase naye nje kuphileni kwakhe ukukahle lokuthi ubonakale lokuthi ungakuphi ungala noma ungala na uLiswati nje ubonakale ukuthi uLiswati kudathi nase kukhulunywa singisi ke bese uyasikhuluma singisi ngoba naso uyasati siyathingeka kuletinye tindzawo kepha nje nalo buve bakho ngoba Siswati lolwimi lithuthukisa nebuve kumcoka kakhulu lokuthi sibe bamvu lesibacucudelako batali lokuthi abakhanze kumcoka ukuthi labamfana basifunze lesiswati basikhulume lesiswati nalele tilwimi atikavaleleki kodwa lelethu lwimi alihambe embili.
Yeah, ngicabanga ukuthi sengike ngayibona ngiboneka ngile debate lena on social media ngikhosi lokuthi hayi wena ukhuluma iSiswati lesingiso mina ngikhuluma iSiswati lesingiso nasi Siswati sithi sisifunza kuphi kahle sona lesingisona lesala eSwatini ngaya kuphi nje noma ngasifunza kuphi lesi lekumele ukuthi ngisikhulume because neSiswati lekuthiwa sakatheni iSiswati mbamba neSiswati sesikhuluma manje so yini nje mhlambe leni ngasibonisa ukuthi siyende as association kuzama ukufunza seSiswati lesingiso.
Siswati lesingiso msakade vele sithola kakhulu ekhaya sisithole na kakhulu ke etikolweni uma ubuka kona kukhona lokho ehluka lokuhamba kokuncane lo uthiwa ngema dialects mancane kakhulu ke la kaNgwane ngoba vele sisebenzisa lulwimi lunye kepha asengikube excellent nje nakuthiwa kubhalwa lihlolo labantwana babhala lihlolo lolufanako lokusho ukuthi bakalwa ngento lefanako sithini ke emsakade etikolweni nangabe nje thine bothishela siyibambe kahle sifundzisa lo lokungiko lo mntana utawuthi aphuma abe asati lelesimiso mbamba Siswati asati futhi asikhuluma ngaphandle kwenkinga asibhala ngaphandle kwenkinga ngoba kukhona ngibekise nje khona tindzaba lokhanza sengibekisa ngaseshiselweni bantu bakhona laba sebenzabeni lapho kwanze ethi bayazunda khona ngekuthi mhlambe bathutane nase South Africa kodwa lapha ekubhaleni akwendeki ukhanze babhale sebazunda nababhala babhala nje lo lokuswati lelesikahle lo lokuma kuvele kubukwa ngalesi Swati lelesingiso so that ikolweni vele kufuna siyibambe la tikolweni kusukela le phasi emabangeni la phasi sikhuphuke nabo ke bamfana siphume nabo egcineni batakufunza ke kahle lo lokungiko naloku ukuthi ke sisebenzise ikakhulu letincwadi letifanele letiko latibona ukuthi tifanele tingene etikolweni tihloliwe letincwadi leto tahlunga kwatholakala ukuthi lo lokulakhathi kulungele ukuthi kungafundwa noma kufundziswe nasebenzisa letincwadi leto angeke sikhecelene.
Okay, so namuhla is a big day niyaliguba lolusuku lomhlala lapha endasa UNESCO ingabe yini nje mhlambe ni tabe niyenda lomhlala sibonje ama activities elanga la namuhla
kulolusuku lamuhla ke sitawucala eNyuvesi yaKaNgwane naseGabence insimbi yesiphohlongo kutaba ke netinkulumo njengoba kwatiwa nje ukuthi nakuna lelanga lelo kuvamisa kuba netinkulumo siyavamisa ke ukuthi sithole inkulumo emcondzisi wa UNESCO siphinde sithole ke netinkulumo tabantu nje labakhulu labamenyiwe eveni lesibhekile ukuthi batawufika utazivetela UNESCO ukuthi bobani labo labamenyiwe siyayiphindze ke sibe nayo ke nemidlalo yesintu lebakhona la kulolu suku lokufaka ekhathi kugitsa ngoba sihambisa dona leti nje temdzabo kakhulu lelanga leli lokukhulu nje ukuthi sihambe siyothola umlayeto wa UNESCO ukuthi uthini siubambe umnyaka wonke size siyofika eminyakeni lotako nekuthola ke imlayeto lechamuka kibo labakhulu belive lokufaka ekhathi basetiko letemfundo nalabo nje labatabe bamenyiwe lesitawubona kulelanga lethu la namhla ukuthi mhlambe UNESCO usimemele bani lotawu khona ukuthi asiphela umavi lamcoka kuleli lolusuku lamuhla siyayeke sicele ke nasetikolweni nje lokuthi le ngcikithi nje kathe yahanjiswa yafika etikolweni nakhona ke bese sicele ukuthi bayende lemidlalo kuletinye itikolo nje uyakhanza ukuthi batawuthola leso sigashana baphume bayodlala ke leyo midlalo yesintu ukhanze ukuthi kuyakhulunywa nje lo lelwimi lwesiswati nje kulelanga leli nje esikolweni namuhla
ngeke abhalwe phasi namhla kukhulunywa isiswati
kufanele kube kanjalo umsakade kufanele kube kanjalo bamfana nje sibakhululeke bakhulume ulwimi lwabo lwesiswati kepha ke phela nasesiya eclassini la English asikakathi ukuthi sokutawuchubeka kakhulu ngesiswati kodwa nje bamfana bakhululeke badlale leyo midlalo yesintu kube kuhle nathi sitabeke siligubha lusuku saseke sesiyabuyisela kubothishela ukuthi kuhambe njani ngitiphi into mhlambe nabo lokubheka ukuthi batende usachubeka umnyaka wekufundzisa
lokusho ukuthi nani indaba enikhuluma Siswati sodwa nje namuhla kulomcimbi
namhla Siswati sodwa nje msakade kude singise Siswati sodwa
okay kuyavakala sibonga kakhulu Nkosi nguMachawe Dlamini lo ngupresident wenhlangano yabothishela labafundisa lolwimi lwesiswati etokolweni namhla kalivile Eswatini lugubha lolanga lo International Mother Tongue Language Day lelanga ke leligujwa mhlaba wonke on the 21st of February kepha ke silive leSwatini siligubha lomuhla lapha endase eUNESCO wayeveteke lapha president ukuthi bothishela noma ke bantu abesikole lamuhla bavumelekile ukuthi balokhulume lolwimi lomuhla esikolweni kepha ke batakhuluma singisi nabaye eclassini lesingisi siselikhefu sitaba sicubekene nalehlelo.
To all the viewers of Eswatini TV in the kingdom and beyond. Eswatini TV is regulated by the Eswatini Communications Commission through the Broadcasting Code and Broadcasting Guidelines. Under these instruments, the station commits to broadcasting information and news that have been fact-checked, programs and content in respectful language with no elements of hate speech, violence or sexual activity. If you hear any unsuitable content on this channel, you have a right to voice your complaints with the station management. Should you not be satisfied with the response or action taken, you can escalate your matter to the Communications Commission at PO Box 7811 Babani. Call 2406 7000 or send an email to info@escom.org.za. For more information, visit www.escom.org.za.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Hi, I'm Golda. I work here at the IMF. Our aim is to provide the best possible advice on economic policy to our member countries, helping them to create conditions so everyone prospers from economic growth. One question our economists are always getting: how can we reduce poverty and foster inclusive growth? There are a few ways to think about it. Some say the government should be heavily involved in the economy, with regulations to keep people safe and high taxes that fund and support a healthy, well-educated and inclusive society, even if it's at the expense of higher growth. Others believe that the government should have little or no part to play in the economy. Lower taxation means more money in everyone's pockets. More individual freedom, they say, means more economic growth overall. But maybe there's a target we all could be shooting for: the best policies on inclusion and growth. Essentially, inclusive growth is about making the economic pie bigger and sharing those slices more widely. So, how do we get there? By aiming for a middle ground. Both sides mostly recognize the need for social safety nets, public pensions, unemployment insurance, food programs. These measures prevent extreme poverty and provide a basic standard of living. At the IMF, inclusive growth is central to our work because reducing poverty is in everyone's interest. Part of having a free and equitable society is ensuring we all benefit from its growth, no matter who we are. And it's not just about creating a fair and equal chance to succeed for individuals, regions, or countries. It's about distributing growth fairly for future generations too. Overall, inclusive growth is based on the idea that wealth creation, economic freedom, and equal opportunity can and should coexist.
Hello to all the viewers of Eswatini TV in the kingdom and beyond. Eswatini TV is regulated by the Eswatini Communications Commission through the Broadcasting Code and Broadcasting Guidelines. Under these instruments, the station commits to broadcasting information and news that have been fact-checked, programs and content in respectful language with no elements of hate speech, violence, or sexual activity. If you hear any unsuitable content on this channel, you have a right to voice your complaints with the station management. Should you not be satisfied with the response or action taken, you can escalate your matter to the Communications Commission at PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Call 2406 7000 or send an email to info@escom.org.za. For more information, visit www.escom.org.za.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Let's take a look at international news this morning. Russia fired scores of missiles and drones at targets across Ukraine on Sunday, crashing into energy and rail infrastructure and residential buildings just 2 days before the 4th anniversary of Moscow's all-out invasion. The capital, Kyiv, regularly targeted by Russian missile and drone attacks since the start of the full-scale invasion, has faced waves of overnight strikes in recent weeks as Moscow has intensified assaults amid freezing winter temperatures.
In this suburb of Kiev, homes stand engulfed in flames amid mountains of rubble. Emergency crews race to put out the fire, using excavators to claw through the debris for survivors. These are the scenes after an overnight wave of Russian strikes, which targeted Ukraine's energy sector and railways, also hitting residential buildings like these ones.
I had to be pulled out because I was buried. The ceiling fell from the roof and covered me. My husband pulled me out, lifting all of this. I didn't see anything. I only woke up because of it. I don't even remember if I heard it or not. I just realized that I was covered by something.
I was at home with my 2 children when one of them started screaming, so I ran over. Then I saw that there was a fire here and people were screaming loudly. I calmed my children down. I literally live right here.
Blasts also rocked the capital in the early hours of Sunday morning as temperatures plunged to -10 degrees. Residents were urged shelters as a nationwide missile alert was issued. The Ukrainian Air Force confirmed it had intercepted the majority of the 300 drones and over half of the 50 ballistic missiles launched. Ukraine's southern Odessa region was also struck, sparking fires that emergency services fought to contain. Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have been occurring almost daily, with the recent escalation coming just 48 hours before the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Islamabad said it carried out strikes along the border with Afghanistan early on Sunday, targeting what it called hideouts of Pakistani militants it blamed for recent attacks inside Pakistan. The Afghan Red Crescent Society said more than a dozen people were killed. Pakistan didn't specify the locations targeted, but the Afghan Defense Ministry said in a statement various civilian areas in the provinces of Nangara and Pakita in eastern Afghanistan were hit, including a religious madrasa and multiple civilian homes.
When Pakistan struck Afghan areas near its border overnight, some residents first thought it was an earthquake. Powerful blasts destroyed homes, killing and wounding people inside.
It was bombed and everything was destroyed. The house was completely destroyed. My children and family members were there. My father and my sons were there. All of them were killed.
The Pakistani government said it targeted 7 camps used by the Pakistani Taliban operating from inside Afghanistan. It says the Taliban government in Kabul, back in power since 2021, has allowed the militant group and others to use its territory to launch a wave of suicide attacks on Pakistan. The Taliban deny the accusation.
At midnight, Pakistani jet aircraft bombed the areas of Kogiani, Kanikel, and Bisat districts. Civilians were killed. In one house, there were 23 family members. 5 injured people were taken out by the Taliban Mujahideen.
Pakistan has faced growing insecurity. Earlier this month, an affiliate of the Islamic State group claimed responsibility for a suicide blast at an Islamabad mosque that killed 31 people. A week ago, a suicide bomber backed by gunmen rammed a vehicle filled with explosives into the wall of a security post in Bajaur district, killing 11 soldiers and a child. The two countries signed a ceasefire in Doha in October.
The Supreme Court struck down President Donald Trump's far-reaching global tariffs on Friday, handing him a stinging loss that sparked a furious attack on the court he helped shape. The decision could have ripple effects on economies around the globe after Trump's moves to remake post-World War II trading alliances by wielding tariffs as a weapon. But an unbowed Trump pledged to impose a new global 10% tariff under a law that restricted to 150 days and has never been used to apply tariffs before.
Tariffs were the backbone of Donald Trump's strategy to gain leverage in foreign and trade disputes. But the U.S. president was forced to scrap those struck down by the Supreme Court, specifically the ones imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. In its opinion, the court cited the Constitution, writing, "The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes." The justices rejected the administration's argument that a warlike situation justified extraordinary presidential powers. The Supreme Court added, the United States, after all, is not at war with every nation in the world. The 6-3 decision included both conservative and liberal justices. 2 of the 6 justices who rejected the tariffs were appointed by Donald Trump himself.
Well, thank you very much for being here. The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country.
In his executive order ending the tariffs, President Trump detailed the reason behind each one of them, including the war on illicit drugs, rebalancing the trade deficit, Russia's war in Ukraine, Iran's nuclear program. The U.S. president reimposed a global 10% tariff, citing Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act, which allows the president to impose up to 15% tariffs up to 150 days, with some exemptions. The question of what should be done with the $175 billion already collected with the now defunct tariffs has yet to be answered. Donald Trump told reporters the issue could take years to litigate.
Thousands of businesses won a hard-fought victory when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled to overturn the White House's emergency tariffs, but the process of getting refunds has only just begun. In a decision that could ripple throughout the global economy for years, the court ruled that U.S. President Donald Trump was not allowed to use the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act to levy broad tariffs on imports.
In this North Carolina brewery, most of the grains are imported from England or Germany, meaning tariffs have hit hard. The owners of Blackbird Brewery say they are satisfied with the Supreme Court's decision, but remain wary.
I don't think my rosés from Germany are going to suddenly be $2 less next year. I think everything's going to pretty much stay as it is, and we're all going to have to continue to eat these costs.
The tariffs imposed by Donald Trump last April caused prices to rise and even cut some businesses off from their supplies. The owner of this Italian market searched far and wide and spent a lot of money to substitute products that were no longer affordable for them after tariffs hit. This stock will be difficult to sell.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that things will change for the better, but right now we're still stuck with the stock that we've paid high prices for. So it's going to be a long time before a small business like ours starts to see the benefits of the tariffs again.
However, some businesses like this aluminium factory will have limited challenges and in fact saw the tariffs as an advantage over competitors who import materials.
It probably won't change a huge amount of the day-to-day here because we source most of our stuff domestically. And at this point, most of the extrusion market has already absorbed the new pricing that has been a result of the importing of raw goods from other places.
The Supreme Court's decision does not affect tariffs applied to specific sectors, including aluminium. Metal imported into the United States from European countries, for example, will remain subject to a 50% tariff.
In a defiant response to a Supreme Court of the United States ruling on tariffs imposed by Donald Trump, the United States president hit back by pledging a new 15% global tariff to remain in force for 150 days. The tariff would exclude the automotive, steel and aluminium sectors, but the court's decision has left a staggering $133 billion in already collected taxes hanging in the balance. With a massive refund battle looming, the process is shaping up to be chaotic.
Donald Trump is doubling down, refusing to retreat even after the unprecedented Supreme Court's reversal of his imposed tariffs. After first announcing a 10% duty globally on Friday, the president upped the ante on Saturday in a social media post, saying he would raise it to 15%. At a press conference after the ruling, a defiant Trump said he would not back down.
I have the right to do tariffs, and I've always had the right to do tariffs. And it's all been approved by Congress, so there's no reason to do it. All we're doing is we're going through a little bit more complicated process, not complicated very much, but a little more complicated than what we had. We'll be able to take in tariffs, more tariffs.
Trump is adopting the new tariffs with the never-used law under the 1974 Trade Act. But after 150 days, Donald Trump will need a congressional vote to keep the tariffs long-term. A high-stakes gamble as midterms approach and some Republicans in both the Senate and the House oppose Trump's use of tariffs. Meanwhile, the question of potential refunds is looming. Companies that already paid these tariffs are demanding compensation, and economists are projecting a massive refund bill as high as $175 billion.
So on one hand, the Supreme Court did not talk explicitly about the $175 billion in tariffs that could potentially be refunded. On the other hand, their ruling today clearly does open that door.
But the court did not rule on how a refund could be worked out. It's leaving that task to lower courts, a process that could take years. Some Democratic governors argue the government should also compensate consumers. Illinois' J.B. Pritzker is calling for a $1,700 refund per household, a sum of nearly $9 billion for his state.
Donald Trump said on Saturday that he was raising U.S. import levies from 10% to 15%, a move announced a day after the Supreme Court of the United States ruled much of his aggressive tariff policy illegal. He added that in the coming months, his administration would pursue alternative, legally permissible ways to impose tariffs. As Trump once again ratchets up global trade barriers, the European Union is left facing renewed uncertainty over its trade relationship with the U.S.
With Donald Trump ratcheting up global tariffs, the EU is once again left with question marks for its trade relationship with the U.S. For French President Emmanuel Macron, the way forward is, as always, to adapt.
The fairest rules possible involve reciprocity and not being subjected to unilateral decisions. So we'll look exactly at the consequences, what can be done, and we will adapt.
Businesses in France have been on their toes since Trump started his trade war as they struggle to forecast the unpredictable decisions by the U.S. president. This includes wine producers, as the U.S. remains their #1 market for spirits.
As long as Trump is in power, it won't be easy, because he's clearly someone who just makes decisions just like that, spontaneously. So we'll never be sure.
But concerns echo beyond France and the European Union. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says he will hold talks on a joint response with the bloc's member states ahead of his upcoming trip to Washington.
We will have a very clear European position on this, because customs policy is a matter for the European Union, not for individual member states. I would like to try to make it clear to the American government that tariffs harm everyone.
France's trade minister says Brussels has the tools to hit back at the US for its latest round of tariffs. Meanwhile, the European Parliament will meet on Monday to discuss further postponing of the ratification of a trade deal agreed with Washington last year.
President Donald Trump said that limited strikes against Iran are possible, even as the country's top diplomat said Tehran expects to have a proposed deal ready in the next few days following nuclear talks with the U.S. Trump's warning came as the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group passed through the Strait of Gibraltar and entered the Mediterranean Sea after being sent by Trump from the Caribbean, according to images of the ship by the maritime photographers posted to social media.
Not one, but two aircraft carriers, both coming together in the same part of the world. This has been a rare sight for decades. The USS Abraham Lincoln is already in the Gulf, accompanied by its escort battleships, and now the largest carrier in the world, the Gerald R. Ford, is well on its way, pictured here in the Mediterranean.
The media, thank you.
President Donald Trump was asked on Friday whether he's considering military strikes on Iran. With 14 ships, hundreds of aircraft and thousands of troops, it's the largest US build-up in the region since the Iraq War deployment, which was much larger. And by all accounts, Iran is preparing for the worst. This satellite imagery shows tunnel entrances at the Eswatini nuclear complex completely covered in soil to protect it. Likewise, these pictures show a new military facility built to replace the one destroyed by Israeli strikes in 2024, also covered in soil. Meanwhile, the window for diplomacy is closing. Following talks with Washington over the Iranian nuclear program, Iran's foreign minister told American media they are preparing to submit a draft deal in the coming days.
One thing I have to emphasize is that there is no military solution for Iran's nuclear program.
On Thursday, Trump set a deadline of 10 to 15 days for a deal, but Tehran denies an ultimatum is in place.
Iranian students chanted anti-government slogans and scuffled with counter-protesters on Saturday in the latest display of anger at the country's clerical leaders, who also face a U.S. military build-up aimed at pressuring them into a nuclear deal. The gatherings at universities, which were reported by both local and diaspora media outlets, followed a mass protest movement that was met with a government crackdown last month that left thousands dead.
These images, released on Saturday and shared on social media, show Iranian students demonstrating at a university in Tehran. Local news agencies and posts on social media report protests at several universities. There were also reports of some clashes with pro-government groups. The demonstrations took place at the start of a new semester and coincided with ceremonies to mourn those killed by security forces during last month's anti-government demonstrations. The protests take place amid a major military build-up in the Middle East by the US President Donald Trump. He is piling up pressure on Tehran to agree a deal to curb its nuclear program.
I would think that would be enough time, 10, 15 days, pretty much maximum.
The Iranian President, Masoud Pezeshkian, addressing Iran's Paralympians on Saturday, said his country would not give in to bullying. We will not bow down in the face of any of these difficulties. World powers are lining up with cowardice to force us to bow our heads. Just as you did not bow down in the face of difficulties, we will not bow down in the face of these problems. Tensions remain high between Tehran and Washington. Indirect talks earlier this week ended with no sign of compromise.
Prosecutor Thierry John told a press conference he had requested international homicide charges against 7 men and recommended they remain in custody to avoid any disturbance to public order.
have been charged in relation to the death of far-right activist Quentin Duranc. 6 are charged with intentional homicide. The other, Jacques-Élie Favreau, an assistant to far-left France-Unbowed MP Raphaël Arnaud, is charged with complicity. Police are still looking for other suspects. According to Lyon's public prosecutor, some admitted they struck Quentin Duranc and/or other victims. However, they all denied any intention to kill.
These 7 people aged between 20 and 26. One, as you know, is a parliamentary assistant. Some belong to associations and 3 state they have been part of or are close to the far-left movement. The public prosecutor's office has requested that these 7 people be placed in pre-trial detention.
The affair has set off a political firestorm in France. The right and left have traded barbs, blame, and on Wednesday the far-left France-Unbowed national headquarters was evacuated following a bomb threat. French President Emmanuel Macron weighed in for the first time, calling for an end to the strife.
Extreme parties must put their own house in order, the far left in this instance, but also the other extremist groups and the far right, who at times justify violent action.
Macron has also called on Italy's Giorgia Meloni to stop commenting on what is happening in other countries. He was referring to remarks made by the far-right Italian Prime Minister, who had said that Quentin's death is a wound for all of Europe. His rebuke comes just before French municipal elections in March and the next presidential election in 2027, in which some polls suggest the far-right National Rally could have its best chance yet at winning the presidency.
French police will be out in force at a weekend rally for a slain far-right activist, the Interior Minister said on Friday, as the country seeks to contain anger over the fatal beating blamed on the hard left.
To ultra-right groups in France, Quentin Duranc has become a political martyr. They're planning a march this Saturday in Lyon that many, including the city's mayor, want banned, fearing it could turn violent. The Interior Minister, though, is doing no such thing.
I'm responsible for maintaining public order and protecting freedom of expression, so I cannot ban demonstrations unless there are serious risks to public order.
Heavy police deployment is planned, with 2,000 to 3,000 people expected to attend Saturday's march. France-Unbowed MP Manuel Bompard says it's far from being just a tribute to a victim, that it's intended to be a genuine fascist show of force in the streets, involving more than 1,000 neo-Nazis from across Europe. His party has been in the spotlight after an aide to MP Raphaël Arnaud was charged with complicity in the death of Quentin. Investigators suspect several members of La Jeune Garde, an anti-fascist group founded by Arnaud but disbanded last year, of being behind the beating. But politicians on the left are sounding the alarm, accusing the far right of exploiting the killing to demonise the France-Unbowed party ahead of local elections.
I'm calling for the total exclusion of France-Unbowed to keep the party out of our institutions, whether in the National Assembly, where its members sit on numerous committees, or in the upcoming municipal elections.
But the National Rally leader has ordered his party's elected officials and supporters not to attend the march in Lyon, a sign the protests may turn too extreme for the party's newly polished image.
A general strike protesting Argentine President Javier Milei's flagship overhaul of the country's labor law disrupted public transport, hospitals, ports and schools across Argentina on Thursday and intensified a standoff between the libertarian leader and long powerful workers' unions.
The 4th general strike of President Javier Milei's mandate was the biggest yet. That's according to unions, who drummed up thousands of people to protest a labour reform billed as modernising the workforce. The law will make hiring and firing easier, allow employers to lengthen the workday and limit collective bargaining. Milei wants to create jobs, but for striking workers, it's a historic step backwards.
The reform would roll back 200 years of rights won. The way to keep them is through unity on the streets.
CGT, the country's biggest union, says 90% of Argentina was brought to a halt on Thursday. Even transport was crippled. Buses and trains remained stationary, and hundreds of flights were cancelled. Protesters clashed with riot police outside Parliament, but this wasn't enough to deter lawmakers who voted to adopt the reform after a contentious cut to sick pay was scrapped.
What good is an entire library of labour legislation if at the end of the day the system doesn't create jobs?
Milei's drastic cuts to public spending have brought down inflation but failed to tackle stagnant wages and unemployment. The opposition says this reform will only mean more layoffs. It's now up to the Senate to decide when they cast the final vote in the coming weeks.
In the early morning, Florida resident Gisela Salgado headed to a local store with a bag stuffed with clothes, coffee and powdered milk to send to her brother in Cuba. She was not alone, even though some shipping agents in the Sunshine State have restricted the mailing of packages to the nearby crisis-racked communist-ruled island due to logistical problems caused by fuel shortages there. Customers keep showing up.
Early in the morning, Florida's Cuban residents wait outside this local store. They carry bags filled with clothes, coffee, powdered milk, and even envelopes of cash to send to their family in Cuba, struggling amid the fuel crisis. Although some argue mailing packages to the communist-ruled island ultimately supports the government, these exiles insist they will do whatever they can to help their loved ones.
As far as I'm concerned, they can shut down whatever they want, because as long as I have my brother there, I'll keep sending him supplies, because he has nothing to do with this government.
Since the U.S. energy blockade, Cuba has faced a severe fuel shortage, which has impaired daily life. The lack of energy has caused electricity blackouts, inhibiting food and medical supply. With few garbage trucks operational, trash has piled up in the streets. For now, Cubans in the U.S. are able to send basic goods due to an exemption to the U.S. trade embargo on Cuba that allows for exchanges between family members. But some fear these shipments, too, will soon be cut off.
The regime should be beheaded, which is what it deserves. But the people should not have to suffer hardship. The situation is expected to get worse because there is no fuel. But let's hope to God that it gets resolved soon and that there is a change in Cuba, because we really need it.
Packages sent from abroad only help a small minority in Cuba with little effect on the population. The UN has warned that if energy needs continue to go unmet, the country risks a humanitarian collapse.
An amnesty law has come into effect in Venezuela, and on Saturday around 80 political prisoners were freed in Caracas, according to the president of the National Parliament, after the measure was adopted under pressure from the United States following last month's U.S. military capture of President Nicolas Maduro. The law has triggered more than 1.5 amnesty requests and is expected to lead to further releases of people detained for political reasons, even as critics caution that it excludes some categories of prisoners and raises questions about how broadly it will be applied.
Juan Pablo Guanipa enjoyed freedom Friday after his house arrest was ended thanks to a new amnesty law. Surrounded by supporters, the ally of opposition leader Maria Corina Machado called for a democratic Venezuela.
We are not going to do to them what they did to us. They will be able to participate in politics, but you cannot expect to govern as a minority, because democracy is the government of the majority.
On Thursday, interim President Delcy Rodriguez signed the bill into law shortly after it was approved by Parliament. Amnesty is not automatic, however. It must be requested through the courts. The lawmaker in charge of the process has said that prosecutors have asked that courts free more than 370 prisoners so far.
Up until yesterday, we had 405 requests from people who were deprived of liberty. Today, we have 1,152 new requests that have been received.
On Saturday alone, 80 had been released from prison, according to Rodriguez. The bill also extends to 11,000 political prisoners who were paroled or under house arrest, granting them full freedom. But NGOs warn that the law does not fully cover more than 20 years of abuses under Hugo Chavez and Maduro.
This is very serious because it ignores the fact that political persecution and imprisonment have not been a matter of isolated, sporadic events. No, it has been continuous. It has been a continuous line since 1999.
The bill is the result of U.S. pressure put on Delcy Rodriguez following the January 3rd military capture of former President Nicolas Maduro. She has also passed a law privatizing the oil sector and began normalizing relations with Washington.
All right, and that marks the end of our international news. Thank you for staying with us. We go for an ad break and come back with our in-house economist, Sunny Lesbia. Stay with us.
To all the viewers of Eswatini TV in the kingdom and beyond. Eswatini TV is regulated by the Eswatini Communications Commission through the Broadcasting Code and Broadcasting Guidelines. Under these instruments, the station commits to broadcasting information and news that have been fact-checked, programs and content in respectful language with no elements of hate speech, violence or sexual activity. If you hear any unsuitable content on this channel, you have a right to voice your complaints with the station management. Should you not be satisfied with the response or action taken, you can escalate your matter to the Communications Commission at PO Box 7811 Babani. Call 2406 7000 or send an email to info@esccom.org.za. For more information, visit www.esccom.org.za.
All right, welcome back to the program. You're watching Kusile Breakfast Show. This is the Monday edition. Of course, the speech from the throne this past Friday has set the tone for the 2026 financial year. That is the third session for the 12th Parliament. And of course, His Majesty King Mswati III outlining a lot of bold directives for Cabinet aimed at transforming the country's economic status as well as its trajectory, from reducing reliance on SACU revenue as well as accelerating infrastructure delivery to digital transformation. A lot of emphasis around energy reform as well as poverty reduction. The vision is quite clear and it is not to be mistaken, but it's also very ambitious and far-reaching. But the real work now shifts to the Prime Minister as well as the entire Cabinet. Can these directives be translated into tangible economic outcomes for Eswatini? We have been seeing headlines waking up this morning from members of Parliament saying that they will be holding ministers accountable. We have also heard word from Business Eswatini and Congo saying that all these directives are achievable so long as the ministers and the entire Cabinet is willing and is ready to make the necessary action. Our economist, Sunny Lesbia, joins us now this morning to chime in from an economic perspective. Sunny, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time, per usual. You step back. It has been, 3 days since the speech from the throne. And of course, I know that you were listening when the King was pronouncing it. What stands out for you the most from an economic perspective?
Thank you, Mr. Ngumaro. Good morning to you and a good morning to the viewers. So listening to the whole speech, Mr. Ngumaro, for me, it came out as His Majesty was really just saying, let's transform the economy and let's make it work for all Eswatini. And I think I liked it when His Majesty commanded that we need to transform the economy so that we can turn the GDP per capita from 78,000 to 480,000. 2000. So now that's going to take quite a lot. And not only did he just commission that, what was present in His Majesty's speech in Parliament were also the tangible options that the country has to take. So number one for me, I think it was the issue around, turning Eswatini into a financial hub. That is one of the most potent ways that you could turn small nations that are dwarfed by very big neighbors across the border into really the digital edge, into growth, give that advantage that you are not going to otherwise have, right? So that for me was the first, and then secondly, it was the call to bold business, because that's what the economy needs: bold business that's going to come and set up and employ a Maswat. And I think that came out a lot in the speech, in His Majesty's speech, and that we need the economy to create job for our people. And I think that resonated quite well with me. And also the fact that calling on the education system to transform and get in line with the 21st century. That is what we need, to develop the labor force and the acumen that we need to survive in this present century as a nation. So His Majesty's speech was quite on point and potent on those things. And then also, the call around health. We are as good as our let's say, is our weakest link. Our labor force thrives when it is healthy. In an unhealthy situation, the labor force will not thrive, right? So I think for me, that is what has structured and spoke to the economy, and then also the infrastructure projects. And I think His Majesty, they did chime in the fact that let's find ways to redistribute and do a lot of the infrastructure work at regional level, and so that it is not all centralized. Now that is going to move development in the kingdom. And I think also the energy issue, we've been talking about it, and I think His Majesty was right on point there. We have the potential to get to energy sufficiency by 2030. Botswana did in 3 years. I think Zambia did it in 5 years. So by 2030, that's quite an attainable goal. So it's not something that has never been done. So we can do it as a nation. Once we get to energy sufficiency and water sufficiency, then commerce has no reason not to thrive in that environment. And we are continuing to see the tarring of our roads. And we do know that our roads are actually ranked amongst the best in the region. And His Majesty did say that we have state-of-the-art roads. And that's a fact that's been documented. Eswatini has a very good road network compared to, other comparator countries in the region. So I think His Majesty really did give a directive with projects, because for me, when I look at His Majesty's speech, I would simply now expect to go back to the drawing board as a cabinet and start turning those into tangible and actionable goals. They have goals, they're quite tangible. Now, what we need is the different projects to drive His Majesty's speech, and I think it's quite commendable. It has the goals, the visions, the timelines, everything we need to make it work. So, Mr. Nxumalo, I think it's up to Parliament right now, and we'll be watching what the Finance Minister is going to be tabling probably next week or upper week when he tables his budget. And we do expect to find, some tangible moves towards shifting the economy in that right gear. And for me, that's the gear we need to be heading in, Mr. Nxumalo. We need to reduce reliance on SACCO revenues, and that comes with expanding the revenue base. And I think I've already said this before, that I am expecting to see the next budget coming in with new tax, alternatives instead of the income tax and the corporate tax. We need to start thinking wealth tax and other tax avenues, so that we're expanding our base and also improving on big business. We need to get big business into Eswatini, and we need to put our boots on the ground to make sure that works, and to make sure that we can get big business into Eswatini.
Yeah, you are outlining very critical issues there. I mean, you start with employment, you talk about business, you talk about the education system, infrastructure projects, energy sufficiency, very, very critical. But, you know, I do want to circle back to what you mentioned there when you were speaking on health, and you are saying we are as good as our weakest link. And again, the topic around execution, and I think, you know, when you really listen to what His Majesty King Mswati III said there, when he said this drug shortages issue must come to an end. One wants to really understand, you know, if it is now lamented in such a high order and with such command, especially from an economic point of view, Mr. Sbia, what this bold directive now, because almost every year we hear conversations around this drug shortage issue, and I suppose that is why this time around it was such a bold statement. What must be different in 2026 that this is not just something that is aspirational, but something that is actionable?
Thank you, Mr. Ngumalo. And I think for me, His Majesty hit it on the nail there. We were waiting for this directive from the throne because it's a problem we've been dealing with for the past 3 years. So in my view, Mr. Ngumalo, I've always looked at the problem in twofold. Number one, you have the issues of efficacy within the central medical stores and within the entire health bureaucracy. That's a problem that the government has been saying they're trying to solve over the past 3 years, right? But mine was, in as much as you are solving that, what are we doing in the interim to make sure that we are getting medicine into hospitals? So what I would expect is, if we haven't gotten to a point where we can now say we are ready and we have streamlined CMS, so government is going to be procuring. We have agencies in the country, and I mean, before the whole rearrangement of the American system, we've always had PEPFARs and other entities. We still have those entities which could have, in the interim, taken over the procurement and the distribution of drugs. So what we're lacking right now is, as we are fixing the bigger problem, what do you have in place instead of seeing that drug money? Because right now, when you look at the health budget, drugs are grossly underspent because we're still trying to fix a system there. So it's not an issue of the money is not there. It's a system that is being fixed. So in the process of fixing the system, what are we putting in place? Can we have that in place in 2026? That interim strategy where we're able to get drugs to the people, while at the same time we are fixing the bigger problem. And then once the bigger problem has been fixed, we then revert into that government procurement system. And I think that was quite tangible. And I think it was a discussion at some point in time, and we do not know where it went. So let's get that separate thing in place, or let's roll out the CMS, restructuring. It's been far too long. We need to have it working now. We need our people to get access to drugs.
And of course, as we expect the budget speech, hopefully this coming Friday, I suppose inferring from what you are saying there is there has to be strict budget allocations, but not only strict, very sufficient budget allocations if we are to heed on the King's directive there. But not only the budget allocation, other alternatives outside of just the budget allocation. So we are, excited to see how that pans out. And of course, we hope that it pans out in a way that is going to be profitable for our economy. Let's get into SACU dependency, because when I remember that was mentioned around the beginning of the speech from the throne, and a strong call was made there to reduce the reliance on SACU revenues. How difficult is that transition? How long does a realistic diversification journey take place?
I think there, Mr. Ngumalo, it's quite something that can be done right now, because it's about diversifying the economy, opening the economy up, getting big business into the country, and restructuring the tax system in itself, where we get to those avenue of taxes that we were not collecting. For example, we don't have a wealth tax in Eswatini, we don't have an inheritance tax, yet those are the avenues through which a lot of wealth gets transferred from one generation to the next. And, some other, the ultra-rich will never actually even have the money for you to tax because their monies are always held somewhere. So there's something we can always shift and move very much in very fast procession. And then also the World Bank did highlight back in, I think it was around June, July last year, where they said, in Eswatini, you could, if you just improve enforcement, you could still collect more taxes without adding new taxes. You could improve the tax collection. So there are quite a lot of actionable items that you can do. And we do know that once things have been passed and it's on the side of the revenue services, they tend to move fast, and they do have ways to ensure compliance and make sure that they're reducing those revenue leakages. So on the revenue gathering side, what we need is Parliament to enact a new revenue stream, and we do know we have a quite capable service that can simply just do that collection. But what we also need is to ensure that we bring big business into Eswatini, and that's where we need to do a proper diagnostics as a country to find out why we have failed over the longer period to get big business to come and settle in Eswatini. And once we've done that diagnostics, we fix that. We know that Eswatini has been ranked in the top 10 business-ready countries in Africa, but then you tend to also ask yourself, what is the bottleneck? Once we can address that bottleneck, Mr. Ngumalo, I do promise you in the next 6 to 12 months, Eswatini could be fully transformed.
We can try to get Honorable Minister Mangoba Khumalo in studio sometime this week to help us really understand whether, there is a bottleneck. We have seen, of course, last year at the Business One-Stop Shop, again, what you are highlighting and was highlighted by His Majesty the King, that Eswatini has been ranked top 10 best countries in Southern Africa for business-ready countries. Very exciting news and a proud moment for the Kingdom of Eswatini, but really excited to see Eswatini enjoying that, because again it speaks to the employment opportunities that you spoke of in the beginning there. But you also again speak on the tax alternatives that our ERS, our Ministry of Finance has the responsibility of making in the Kingdom of Eswatini if we are really to diversify our economy. So looking forward again to the budget speech on Friday. On the conversation of infrastructure push, of course, we are awake and alive to the Taiwan Industrial Park, the energy reserve, and the King did say that our energy reserve, in a very proud moment, that it is already underway. I want us to speak about, from a growth perspective, which infrastructure investment would deliver the fastest economic multiplier.
So in terms of infrastructure, Mr. Ngumalo, you have to think of it as the initial investment. So we have around 5 billion on the strategic oil reserve, and we do expect that one to triple up and make more impact in terms of that multiplier effect, and also in terms of cushioning industry now once it comes to operation. So it's going to give us a bit of stability, and it's going to make commerce relatively stable in Eswatini and quite predictable and not susceptible to those shocks. But what has to happen there is you have to make sure that you get local sourcing and locals involved there to make sure that you get the full effect of the multiplier. But in terms of size, we do expect that that petrol station there to have a bit of prolonged impact on the economy, like for the next 2 to 3 years, as we draw down on these 5 billion investments. And we do expect the roads, because they tend to hire a lot of labor, from on the ground level. So we do expect that to have a bit of some impact on the unemployment problem. And at the same time, what I would be praying for, Mr. Ngumalo, is getting the 8 billion into the country. Again, that's going to have an impact on the infrastructural side, and hopefully it's also going to grow the service side. We are hoping that as we have more Taiwanese investors, we are going to also be importing a lot of those skills to grow a certain industry and the service side, so that when we are done with this infrastructure investments, we have a service sector and a manufacturing sector that's willing and ready to take off and give you that sustained growth over the next period when you don't have new programs as a country. So I think the way His Majesty has structured it is quite on point and quite superb, because you're also not only relying on the infrastructure itself for growth, but you're also building a base and an industry that is going to grow the nation. And if we can get over and above that 8 billion into the country as much as commanded, and then we get even more such projects in the country. Now that's going to drive us in the long term, because that's where long-term sources of growth come from, Mr. Nxumalo. We can only build so much infrastructure, but at some point you do then need to have a thriving service sector, and His Majesty's speech seems to encapsulate all of those, and that's quite admirable on my side, Mr. Nxumalo.
Yeah, on the conversation of energy, and this is what I love about His Majesty the King. We saw him being proactive last year in conversation with Mozambique around securing our energy sufficiency with some of, the relations that we are forging with Mozambique. And that is now followed by a directive to say, now it's over to you, Cabinet, it's over to you, Prime Minister. Let's make this a reality, generating at least 50% of electricity locally by the year 2030. And that is quite significant, if you ask me. What does it mean for energy pricing, one, in an economy where just a couple of weeks ago we were having just conversations, I think, for a whole week around the price of electricity, but also for our investment confidence? I think that is also quite critical.
Yeah. So in terms of, let's start with the investor confidence, because what you'd need is investors to come in and set up. But what I like at the same time is that we are going green. So we are also considerate of the environment and the fact that Eswatini is this tourism destination largely dependent on that, environmental aesthetic that the kingdom offers. So we do expect that as we are going green, the setup cost for green energies are very high, Mr. Nxumalo, but once you get them set up, you then tend to see that bit of stabilization. So the impact on the prices on the short to medium term may not be that profound in market, but as you come into year 4, year 5, and you move forward with those projects, and then you start seeing the costs tapering off and stabilizing. So we should expect to see that. And in terms of investor confidence, I think we've already seen an EIA to establish a thermal power station, and we do have, some amount of capacity that's already being installed in terms of solar, and we do have biomass coming into the national grid through from the Lubombo sugar plantations there. So the ground is fertile, and investors seem to be wanting to come into the space, Mr. Nxumalo, to fill up the gap. So that's quite market, and we do expect growth to also come through from there, and then also that's going to support commerce and business confidence, in the sense that you will now be guaranteed of power. And if you're now importing 50% of your power energy needs, that makes you less vulnerable to shocks in neighboring countries and those importing countries, who would then tend to prioritize their own needs when it comes to it over their exports to neighboring countries. And that's going to make Eswatini an even stable destination for business to come through. And if we want this big business, we know that most of this big business, Mr. Nxumalo, are now dealing in AI, and AI is hugely very energy, has a huge demand on energy. And if we need to get to that point, we need to speed up and make sure that by 2030 we are already energy sufficient as a country, so that we can join that bandwagon and move forward with growing and developing the country.
Sibia, thank you so much for your time. Our economist, Sanele Sibia, chiming in on what we expect now from Cabinet, because the speech from the throne has been frank, and indeed now the responsibility sits squarely with the Cabinet. Now we watch with anticipation and we stay ready to hold our ministers accountable. Budget speech very, very soon to make this conversation even more compelling, and we shall have that one. Let's go for a quick ad break. We will wrap up the show shortly.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Minutes before 8 o'clock, sethemba ukuthi nikuthokozela kuba nathi lo muhla ilanga lelikhulu ke lelo lwimi lwemthabo njengoba livele Eswatini nje ligubha International Mother Tongue Language Day lapha endasi UNESCO. Akutaba nje kukhulunywa siswati kuphela lamuhla in commemoration of the day.
Siswati sithethe indzawo yaso lolu kumnanzi kangwane ngoba sihlale nje sithatha indzawo yaso siyanakekene ukuthi liviki nje lisaqala indzaba lenye lenkulu kakhulu ukuthi indzaba sevele ingangani bophezulu komkhono ubugani bakhe sesethabelelo ukuthi sesiphinde silinzele ukuthi sitabe sikhona sonke ngebuningi bethu singemaswati.
Kunjalo Mbukeli, have a lovely day. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Nisale kahle.
Bye.
Mswati inkosi ithula akayithathe akahambe nayo akayithathe yenza bakhe